Hello. Well, before this video actually starts proper, I apologize if you can hear any background music. That's part of the problem when you live in an apartment complex. My neighbors are having some sort of rap session or something. So I'm kind of counting on the poor quality of this camera and its microphone that it won't pick that up, because it is over across on the other side there, but I can hear it. But I hope you guys shouldn't be able to hear it too much, but it's there. Anyways, I'm doing this video, and I'm doing this on Socket 7, and I'm doing it on how to build a general DOS machine. And you're gonna probably thinking, well, you did this video before, and I kind of did. That was more of an overview of what I thought made a great beginner's MS-DOS machine. And since I made that video, I've gotten a lot of messages and comments and stuff, people asking me more questions about it and specific things. So I thought I would go a little bit more in depth on that subject, and I would kind of do a step-by-step just building a simple DOS machine that's probably going to play the majority of DOS games. It's not going to play the really new or later ones. It's not going to play the really early ones for the most part, but it should capture, the good golden age, early 90s, late 80s DOS. It should play a majority of those just fine. Now, I am going to do it like I did in my overview. I'm going to focus on Socket 7. Now, I am going to encourage you, this is not a Socket 7 board, but I'm going to encourage you to use a later board that has PS2 ports. But for whatever reason, a lot of people that have asked me questions have come across AT Socket 7 boards. So with that, I'm going to make this build with an earlier AT Socket 7 board. So it's a little bit more archaic, but it seems that it's what a lot of you guys have been coming across. For me personally, I'm kind of tired of seeing them, because lately I've gone to thrifts and yard sales and whatnot, and I've been lucky lately with AT cases, and I see an AT case and I'm like, ooh, it's an AT case. It's got to be like a 286 or a 386 or a 486. It's probably got some neat obscure video cards or cards in it. And then I open it up and it's an AT Socket 7 board. I'm like, oh god, I'm just tired of seeing them. They don't really interest me anymore. But they make good beginner boards for someone just getting into MS-DOS and they want to build a authentic DOS machine. So that's what I'm gonna do. Now the board I'm talking about is something like this. So what makes it an AT board is this sort of somewhat archaic AT port for the keyboard. Thankfully, these boards, once we get to Socket 7, we start really seeing everything built into the board. So we've got IDE built in, we got floppy built in, COM for printer port, serial ports and stuff. You're going to have PCI, probably not AGP. Unless you're using a later one. If it has AGP, it probably has PS2 ports for keyboard and mouse, not necessarily. It's also going to have AT power connector as opposed to ATX. So it's going to look something very similar to this. 16-bit ISA. Probably a coin battery instead of a barrel battery, which is good, because these are very easily replaceable. You don't have to solder. And they don't necessarily leak, although they do leak. You're probably looking at anywhere from a, Pentium 75, maybe that was Socket 5, but you're probably going to be running around, anywhere from a Pentium probably 100 or Pentium 120, I think, up to a Pentium 233, and that's just Intel. We're not even going into the AMD board and stuff, but I'm going to just advise, just go with an Intel Pentium. It was kind of like the de facto standard for the time. RAM's probably going to be 72 pin, probably, if it's an early AT board. So yeah, it's going to be something like this. So the first thing you want to consider too, usually you're going to find one, it's probably going to be in a case, you're going to find it at a thrift or something, but in case it's not, you really want to consider cases. Now, personally, I'm kind of partial to desktop cases. They are a little harder to find, they're a little harder to work on inside, and they do take up a lot of desktop real estate. I'm kind of partial to them, though. In the mid-90s, maybe even early 90s, they did kind of start falling out of favor for tower designs. Now, this is a tower, AT tower case that's probably more, Pentium-ish. That would be, probably a socket 7 in there. Earlier ones kind of look more like this over here. There's some junk in the way, sorry. But yeah, that little grill thing was pretty popular on earlier. If you find these cases, they probably have a 386 or 286 in them. They also had those big fat power switches on them as opposed to buttons, usually, but not always, as I'll show you in a minute. So, that said, this will be the case we'll be using for our little project. Yes, this case, in my opinion, is far more suited to a 386 motherboard or a 286 or even an 8088, kind of. It's all I have at the moment as far as AT cases go, and the board's already kind of in it and set up, so this is the case we'll be using. Like I said, it's an older style. It has a turbo button, which is pretty much useless on a Pentium. So we were not even going to hook it up. Reset, there's the power switch. CD drives, it really doesn't matter. This is just a 52 speed. It doesn't matter what kind of CD drive. Even DVD drives will work in DOS. They're just seen as a CD-ROM drive. We're just gonna go really super simple with this one. We're just gonna use a 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. If you wanted, you could put in a 1.20 megabyte 5¼ inch floppy drive up here. I didn't write this. This is how it came. Please push button. Do not push tray. I guess they were talking about the. They were probably talking about the CD-ROM drive for the when you open it, and some people just push the tray back in. That could damage the motor. I'm guessing that's what this thing talked about. Also, on the back of it, they did quite a bit of labeling back here too. I found this case and the motherboard we're going to be using actually at a thrift store for about $10. Power. It is the early days of computers. I mean, a lot of people didn't know. So I see a lot of older cases where things are just labeled, like everything's labeled. Keyboard, all these are numbered. I guess they had a sound card there, stuff like that. So yeah, the board inside here is a little more advanced than the one I showed you. We got cables in the way again. But it's basically the same. It's got that AT keyboard port, AT power supply. It also, you can also use an ATX power supply. There's a lot of these kind of transition boards that have both, because there's a transition in the industry. You've got your 72-pin RAM, but it also takes, I forget the number, but this is the later type of RAM. It also has 2 slots for that, which is really nice. Again, I've got the cables already in, but it has all the little ports built in. Pretty much the same as far as slots, except it has one more PCI slot and one less ISA slot, which is fine. There's our CPU. The CPU we'll be using is a 1.66 megahertz Pentium 1 classic CPU with a lot of power behind it, relatively for the time. Very reliable classic CPU. This will run a bulk of games and even do some 3D stuff. So for what we're going to be using for what I'm putting in as cards, we're just going to go, it's simple, very simple. I'm just going to use an ISA Sound Blaster 16. This is a model CT 2800. Nothing too special. It's just using a Vibra chip. Some people like them, some people don't, but it does have a real Yamaha chip on it. If I can focus, doesn't want to focus. There it is, real Yamaha FM chip. You want to really look for that. So really, just a simple sound card. I'm gonna go a little bit different for video. Usually I would go with something like a Verge or something like, a Trio or something like that. for best compatibility and stuff, but I'm just gonna go a little bit different this time. I'm gonna put this thing. I realized doing my last video that I really didn't have many PCI cards, at least 3D PCI cards, and that's why I want to do this. Use this card because I do want to. This is very capable for later 3D games. So you know, the Verge isn't a great card for 3D. This I picked up at Goodwill just 2 or 3 days ago, and this is like a 3D Labs, I forget what it's called, 3D Labs Extreme or something. Anyways, it uses the, I may be pronouncing this wrong, Permedia 2 chip. Anyways, it was a mild success in about around 1997. A lot of people thought of it as a semi-professional card. It does pretty good 2D, image quality. I think this one has, I think it came with 4 megabytes of video RAM. This has the little upgrade for to 8, I believe. So this should be pretty compatible for DOS 2D stuff with pretty decent image quality, and it can do 3D stuff fairly well, OpenGL and Direct 3D stuff like that. So it's a little different. I've never used this card before, so we'll see. All right, so now it's just putting it together. Alright, I'm gonna assume that we all pretty much know how to install RAM. I'm gonna suggest what you go for is anywhere from, I'm gonna say about 32 megabytes, 64 at the high end, 8 at the low end. For Socket 7 though, 8's pretty good for most early 90s DOS stuff, but if you're going to go with Socket 7, you might be running like Windows 3.1 or even Windows 95, 98, and you're probably going to need a little bit more RAM, especially for later games. You want to play like Duke 3D and stuff like that. So I'm going to say at least 32, but up to 64. And you can find those numbers in, if you have a board that supports this style or even the older 72, you just get a couple like 16 megabyte or 32 megabyte little RAM sticks. For the AT power supplies, I always do it. Just remember that there's 2 red lines, and they're always on the outside. So once you put that one in, the other one just goes in next to it. So that's how I always remember 2 red on the outside. Some of these boards, many of them, if you don't have, since you don't have PS2 ports, some of them have a header. I don't know if you could see that down there. But it will usually be next to the AT keyboard port, and there'll be like a little header for PS2 mouse. Now this one goes up and it attaches to this bracket. You can see it here on the other side. Now this won't work, I believe this won't work with a keyboard, just a mouse, but at least you have a PS2 port for a mouse. So most AT Socket 7 boards should have that header. Even some later 486 boards have that, so hopefully it comes with the thing. I don't know, I think the pinouts are probably all the same, but anyways, yeah, make sure your CPU is cleaned. I kind of like dusted mine off a little bit, but that's really it. I mean, just inserting the cards and screwing them in. I'm going to assume everyone knows how to do that. That's pretty simple. So I'll get back to you when we're looking at hard drives. Alright, so let's kind of quickly talk about hard drives. This is just kind of like a basics thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. I did a whole article of this on my blog if you want to read it. It goes really into depth about setting up a hard drive and stuff, and hopefully I hope this video will kind of go along with that blog, and a couple other articles I did as kind of a supplement to help people set up a DOS machine. I know some people prefer, reading and seeing the images and stuff and taking their time rather than watching a video, so just keep that in mind. So I'm not going to talk about SCSI here. This is just a really simple setup. This is an old MFM drive. It's like full light. Don't use this. This is for like an 8088 type machine. And even then, you're probably better off not using one if you can get away with not using one. So really, you just want a standard IDE drive. You can also use compact flash cards. Yes, I don't usually, just because I have a ton of these IDE drives around, and I kind of like the sound of them and whatnot. But for the most part, using like a compact flash card is fine. But we're just going to use an IDE drive here. Now this is a newer one. This is like an 8 GB drive. It's hit or miss. I've had a large percentage of machines that you put this drive like a 8 or even a 20 or 40 gigabyte in, and you load up DOS, and it will still work. I mean, you lose most of the space on the drive. It only sees like 504 megabytes or something, but it should work. And you can even use programs like overlay programs to get more space. And since I'm putting Windows 95 on this along with DOS, I think that's fine. So we're going to try this drive. Like I said, if this drive doesn't work, I have older drives, you know, like 500 megabyte drives. You could try that. But newer drives should work fine for the most part. Something to keep in mind is the cables. See how the ribbon is? This is an older style, and it's slower. The newer style, there's a lot more ribbons, and they're more tightly packed together. I wish I had one in easy access to show you guys, but I don't. But yeah, if you're using a faster drive with this kind of ribbon cable, it's going to get slower performance. But with a Pentium 1 machine, it doesn't really matter all that much. So it should still work just fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the drive in, hook everything up, and then start the machine, and then we'll see where we are at that point, just to make sure it posts. And then we can go with installing. Actually, I'm probably going to install DOS at least at first, and then we'll see. I'm also going to suggest that you put your hard drive and your CD drive on separate IDE channels. You don't have to. You can have your primary IDE, and you can have your hard drive and your CD-ROM drive hooked up to one channel, since each IDE connection supports 2 IDE devices. But I'm going to suggest you use one for your CD and then one for your hard drive. Alright, so here comes a little bit of our moment of truth for our minimal setup right now. I have everything hooked up. The hard drive's hooked up. I have the power, the keyboard and everything. So I should get a post. I don't know if there's anything on that hard drive. If there is, there's a chance it could boot up to whatever's on that hard drive if I have DOS on it or anything. I don't know. I don't know what's on it, if anything. But hopefully I'm going to flick this button, and we'll at least get a post, and then we can go from there about reformatting that hard drive and installing DOS. So, here we go. 40, whatever was in it was a 40 megahertz, but that's good. That's good. We got something. So there we are. 32 megabytes of RAM, 166 megahertz Pentium. It sees the hard drive, it sees the CD-ROM drive. That is very good. So we're off to a very good start. Sorry for that light. So, a little snag, as I was trying to set it up, for whatever reasons that hard drive did not work correctly. I don't know if it's a problem with the hard drive itself or whatever, but I have a stack of these things. So this is an old, this is a 1 gigabyte drive, and this was actually from a Macintosh. It's not a SCSI though, it's an IDE, but you could format it. I formatted it for a FAT32, and I already tried it, and the computer recognizes it, and it works just fine. So yeah, we're going to be using this 1 gigabyte IDE drive. Apple hard drive in a PC. I know it's kind of like heresy or something, but it works. Okay, so now that the post is okay, basically what I'm going to do is install DOS 6.22, which I have the 3 floppy disks for. So it's basically, just putting the floppy disk in and starting it up, and it should boot. Try to boot from the floppy first. You can go into BIOS always and set it up, rearrange boot device order. I usually have the floppy first, or if I'm installing with a CD drive, you can change it to CD drive first and then the hard drive second. But I've set it for the floppy, so it should start booting from the floppy, and then we'll get some options to reformat the hard drive and then install DOS. Alright, so here we go with the process of installing MS-DOS 6.22. I really have to emphasize again that make sure you reformat the hard drive before you install, because you never know. I've done it where I've had like another version of Windows on there, and I didn't format it, and it just got all weird. Just have a clean slate, format your drive beforehand. Luckily, I found out with this Socket 7 board, it has an advanced enough BIOS where it actually does see the full gigabyte, even in DOS, which is kind of great. But yeah, DOS 6.22 is definitely what I recommend for if you're going for a pure DOS machine. There's really not much of a point of using the earlier ones, especially on a Socket 7. It doesn't take long to install. I'm going to speed this footage up here in a minute, but it's just 3 discs. It will prompt you to swap. I also want to apologize for the quality. I'm still using an S-video converter. Thankfully, though, I do have some VGA capture options that I've acquired recently, and I just need to set them up and figure out how they work. And I should be getting really good VGA capture quality here shortly in later videos, and I can get away from this S-video stuff that obviously the text doesn't look so great, so I apologize for that. So I'll speed this up here, and we'll continue with the process. I should also point out real quick, the rest of this video might, if you already know how to set up DOS, the rest of this video may be pretty dry for you. It's really just a step-by-step. So these are just my driver floppies. I have 2 for Sound Blaster, for the Sound Blaster, and then the manager drivers. I have 1 for my mouse drivers. I'm using CT mouse, and then I have my CD drivers. I use GS CD-ROM drivers. I've had really good results with them, and I haven't really had any problems using them. So first thing we want to do is create a folder for our mouse. So MD and then CT mouse. So once you've created that folder, you go into A, you put your disk in and go into A, and here's the drivers for CT mouse. They're really only in the bin file, so what you want to do is use a copy command, copy A, and then copy from bin to the file you just made, CT mouse, and it will copy all those files onto your hard drive. So then you just go into that file, go back to the C drive, and then there's a directory, there it is, that file, that folder we made. So go into CT mouse, and there it is. We just want to use that exe file, CT mouse, and boom, there it goes. It found and installed our mouse at the PS2 port. CT mouse drivers are really small, and they're really cool. I use them all the time. So you can go into your edit file here, so you don't have to do that every time at startup. It's going to be your BAT file. BAT, bay file, and it's your autoexec.bat file, and you can go into that, and then you can just actually add it so on startup it will load your mouse drivers. So it's just C colon / CT mouse, that's our folder, and then / CT mouse.exe. And then that will, every time you start the machine up, it will actually load that exe, and that's your mouse drivers, so you won't have to do anything, which is really nice. So next thing we're going to do is install our CD-ROM driver. So obviously you want to put that floppy in, access the A drive, just hit install, and it actually auto installs. They're really nice drivers. All these drivers are free. You can find them on the internet. So let's see, we already have our mouse going. So you just install, hit OK, and it sets everything up for you. No problem, lickety split. There it goes. And this will give you a, in our case it will be the D drive, which is our CD-ROM drive. And that's it. So at this point we just kind of want to restart and make sure everything's working good. The CD-ROM drivers work, and our little setup we did for the CT mouse in the autoexec bat works as well. So here we are just restarting, and then next we're gonna do our sound drivers for our sound card. And my way I do it, it's just the way I've done it for years. There's probably a more efficient way, but you know. So there's our CD-ROM driver being seen, CT mouse loaded up just fine. So what we want to do now is we want to make 2 new folders. One I like to call Manager, and that's for the Creative Manager program, and the other one I call Sound, and that is for the Sound Blaster 16 drivers. That's just where we're going to temporarily put them, and then we go in and then they'll like unzip and they'll create their own folders. So then we just want to put in the floppies for each, and we want to use that copy command again. So for your manager, we want to copy that floppy over to the manager folder on the hard drive, and then for the Sound Blaster 16 driver files, you obviously put in that floppy drive, and then you copy those over to your sound folder. Like I said, there's probably a more efficient and better way to do this. This is just how I've done it for years. I found this procedure when I first started getting into DOS on a website called, it was like Making the Ultimate Space Quest PC, but it actually had a really good guide for setting up just a general DOS machine. That's kind of where I got my start on learning how to do this stuff. So yeah, just do that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so once those are transferred to our hard drive, go to the manager file that you created first, and all the files from the floppy should be in there. See, I messed up. I tried to run ctcm. That's after you have to unpack the files first. So it's ctcmbbs, I believe is the file we want to run. And then it hit yes. It's asking to overwrite. Just keep hitting yes. It's unpacking these files. And that's that. Then after that's unpacked, then we hit ctcm and run that. Install. Hit install, actually, sorry. And then once you do install, it will just run you through this install processes. And this is loading Creative's manager program. This is for if you're using a Sound Blaster 16, obviously. So you just load this. It automatically adjusts your files. So your autoexec bat and whatnot, your system file, config files and stuff. It's doing all that for you, but you need to run this first. Yeah, and then after that, you want to do a restart. You definitely want to restart your system after that, or else the other steps you'll run into errors and issues. So here we are, we're loading right back in, and then we're going to pretty much do the same thing with the sound file, or it's a sound folder we made where we transferred our the actual Sound Blaster files to. So here's the. You notice this is a 512 kilobyte L2 cache built in on this motherboard. Okay, so here we are back into the operating system. You see there's a new thing that came up as the manager program is running. But we still have to set up our sound card proper. So go into that sound folder we made and pretty much do the same thing. SB basic or whatever, and same process. Yes, to overwrite everything. It's unpacking all those files, and then we can run the install program, and this will configure our sound card. It takes a second to initialize, and just pretty much go through the steps. I really recommend just using the defaults. Uses the settings shown, and then it's just gonna install and set all that stuff up. And does the same thing with your autoexec and config files. Sets that all up for you. And after all this is set up, you should have a working sound card, but I always recommend to make sure we go into the diagnose, but you want to restart your system again. So once that's done, now we're pretty much set up. Now we have our mouse that comes, mouse drivers, CD-ROM drivers, and now our sound card. You don't need drivers for the video card, at least for a very simple setup. DOS doesn't need video drivers, so we're good with that. So here we go, loading up again. And everything should be working now. Starting MS-DOS, it's going to check extended memory. And then there we go. There's the manager running. There's the CD-ROM drivers coming up. There's our sound card being all set up and configured, and mouse drivers installed. And at this point, I like to delete those old folders we don't need anymore, like manager and sound. We don't need those because when we installed it, it made a separate file for all that stuff. So we don't need those anymore. So you can hit del tree and then the folder name and then yes. So now we want to go to our SB16 folder that the driver set up for us, and we type in diagnose. And this pretty much lets us set up the card. Like I said, go with the defaults. Default 22H, 330H default. IRQ5 is usually a good choice. Channel 1. And then I think it asks one more thing. Channel 5. And then you can test.
8-bit testing. 8-bit testing. 8-bit testing. 16-bit testing.
So if that all worked for you and you heard all that, then you're pretty much good to go. You just exit out of here. You just save it. If you don't have Windows, you can, once you do the regular, it'll ask about Windows and it won't let you out. You can just reboot the computer, and then you should be set. Okay, so for the final part of setting up, we're going to look at memory, and we're going to set up memory. We're going to do a real simple memory configuration. So type MEM once you're into the system, and that will show you how much memory you have left. And we don't have much there, low 500s, and a lot of games won't work because of that, or some games will not work because they require more conventional memory. You can hit mem /C/P to get more info on that memory, but what we need to do, we need to run a program called memmaker, and that will automatically configure memory to give you more optimal settings. So you just go to cprompt, hit memmaker, and it will start up. There's other ways to do this. You can do it manually, but if you're new to DOS, this is just the easiest way to do it. There's an express and a custom. I'd suggest custom, just so you can do one really simple thing at this point to free up a little bit more memory. It'll ask about EMS memory. I believe that's EMS. Or I hit yes because I use it. But anyways, there's one option here about using the monochrome section. Just change that to yes, unless you're playing super old stuff. That doesn't really matter, and that will free up some more memory for you. I don't think something of a socket 7's never going to use that space anyways, or at least in my experience. And then it pretty much just does it pretty much on its own. It will go through, it will restart the computer, it'll ask you if it booted up okay. If it did, which it probably will, you hit yes, it reboots again, and then it will have automatically freed up a lot of memory. It moves the files into like upper memory, so it frees up a lot of that conventional memory that you need to use for games. So as we see, running memmaker did free up a lot of memory for us. We're now in the low 600s. So that should be able to let you play a vast bulk of games. There are a couple that require large amounts of conventional memory that you may not be able to run right off the bat, but a majority of games should run now without problem. You can check it out again at mem /C/P. You can see a lot of stuff got moved into upper memory, which is very helpful. One other little stupid trick you could do that really won't affect much, it will free up a kilobyte of memory, is you can go into edit. We'll do that here in a second. Okay, so we go into edit again, and then we go into, instead of .bat, it's .sys, and then we go into our config.sys, and there's a thing that says like last drive. You're not going to use as many drives to take up the alphabet, so change it to something more reasonable. Like I usually use H, and that should free up like a kilobyte of conventional memory. Every little bit counts. Alright, so let's talk about games on this thing. I sampled about 10 games overall just to see how they ran, and for the most part they ran great. So we're just going to go through a quick sampling of the games I tried on it. The 2 games I tried that didn't work was older games. Biomenace, I have it on a weird shareware CD thing, and the menu for the install wouldn't even come up. And Thexter, which is an older game, and I kept getting a memory allocation error when I was trying to install it. Now, there's probably workarounds, but I just wanted to do this in the simplest way possible. For a beginner at DOS that just wants to pop in a floppy or a CD, install it, and run it. So of the 10 games I sampled, sort of old, sort of new, sort of in between, I only had problems with 2, and the rest worked without issue. So let's take a look at some of these games. So first, of course, we have the classic Doom. This is Ultimate Doom. Even with a lot of stuff going on, no problems. The Pentium 166 just flies through this game. No problems whatsoever. Played great. Next up was Duke Nukem Atomic Edition, another late DOS game, kind of optimized for the Pentium. Again, you know, I didn't play these for hours and hours on this machine, but from what I did play, you know, it played just fine. I didn't see any issues. Very smooth experience. So next is Quake. I think I'm going to leave you after this one. Keep watching if you want to see a couple other games running on this machine. They all run pretty well. Like I said, I had minimal problems. I'm going to have some links down in the description, hopefully to the drivers and to the relevant blog articles of mine. Thank you for watching. I hope this helps you set up a DOS machine if you're looking to do that kind of thing. And I hope it makes a good reference, and also check out the links to the blog articles. Maybe you can use both of them to help you put together a DOS machine. I know they can be kind of confusing at first, but there's really nothing more satisfying than actual playing on period hardware. It has its frustrations, but there is a good bit of satisfaction that comes with putting it all together and doing it. So thank you again for watching. actually, back for this game because I forgot about it. Magic Carpet, I think this game on this system is running too fast. Although, I mean, it's the right era, it's really the right time period, I think, but it feels like it's running too fast, although it could be me because I never played this game until doing this capture for this video. So maybe it's just, the controls are really kind of awkward, so maybe it's just me, but it does feel a little fast. And look at the people running around like they're on crack. So yeah, I don't know. It feels fast to me, but like I said, I never really played this game before, so maybe it's just the controls and I have to get used to it. But this game might play a little too fast, at least stock. There's always things that you could do to slow down games, but you know, the whole point of this was to see what games we can just put in, install, and play without doing anything else. And I don't know, Magic Carpet may or may not play at the right speed.